I had one envelope in my hand the day everything broke. Inside that envelope was the deed to a $365,000 cottage by the sea, paid in full with my parents' names listed on the welcome letter and my name listed as the owner. I drove 6 hours through morning fog to surprise them on a quiet Sunday. But the second I opened the front door, the house already smelled like my sister's perfume, the kind she only wore when she wanted everyone to look at her. Then I heard her laugh from the kitchen, and I heard my mother say the words that finished a part of me forever: "Marlena, sweetheart, this place was always meant for you." Before I tell you the rest, I want you to do one small thing. I want you to picture yourself standing in that doorway, holding a folder that cost you 10 years of saving, 10 years of skipped vacations, 10 years of side jobs after midnight, and ask yourself one honest question. If your own mother said those words about your own sister in a house that you alone paid for, would you walk in calmly? Would you turn around and drive home? Or would you stay quiet and let them keep talking until they showed you the full truth? Tell me in the comments, because what I chose to do that morning is the reason I am sitting here today telling this story without shaking. My name is Ackles, and on the morning this story begins, I was 32 years old. I had been a senior data analyst at a logistics company for 7 years. I lived in a small one-bedroom apartment in the city, the same apartment I had moved into right after college, the same apartment my mother had once called cute for now. I had a savings account I had built by being careful with every dollar. I had no husband, no children, and only one cat named Olive, who was 12 and slept on my keyboard whenever I worked from home. People at work used to joke that I was the most boring person they knew. I always smiled at that joke, because being boring was the only way I had been able to save the money that was now sitting in that folder in my hand. The cottage was in a small coastal town called Pelham Bay, about 300 miles north of where my parents lived. It was painted soft blue with white trim. It had a sunroom that faced the water and a small wood deck where you could sit at sunset and hear the waves roll in. There were 2 bedrooms, a clean little kitchen with new appliances, and a fireplace my mother had cried about the first time she saw photos of it. My father had spent his whole life talking about retiring near the ocean. He grew up far inland in a dry, quiet town, and he used to tell me as a child that the smell of salt water made him feel like a king. I never forgot that. I was 11 when he told me that. I held it in my heart for 21 years, and then I bought him the smell of salt water. I want you to understand who I was inside my family before I tell you what happened next, because the events of that day did not appear out of nowhere. They were the product of a long pattern, and like most patterns, I had been too close to it for too long to see it clearly. I was the older daughter by 4 years. My sister Marlena was 28. From the time we were small, the rules in our home were simple, even though no one ever said them out loud. Marlena was the bright one, the charming one, the one who made my parents laugh. I was the dependable one, the one who fixed the printer, the one who helped with dishes, the one who reminded everyone about appointments, the one who lent money. Marlena was treated like a guest in her own life. I was treated like staff in mine. I did not see this clearly until I was almost 30. I just thought I was being a good daughter. By the time I was 22, I was helping my parents pay for things. Small things at first. A car repair when my father's old sedan broke down. A property tax bill the year my mother had her gallbladder surgery. By the time I was 25, I was sending them $600 a month every month with a sticky note that said, "For the things you do not want to ask about." My father always called me when the deposit landed and said the same line: "You are a good girl, Ackles, you make us proud." I lived for that sentence. I would replay it in my head on bad days at work. It made me feel like I had earned my place at the table I was born at. Marlena did not send money. Marlena did not visit on weekends. Marlena did not call to ask if mom needed her prescription refilled. Marlena lived 40 minutes from our parents and managed to see them twice a year. But when she did show up, she came in like a parade. She would bring a bottle of nice wine I knew she had not paid for. She would tell loud stories about her vacations. She would post photos of my amazing parents online with captions about how blessed she was. After she left, my mother would say, "Marlena has such a busy life, that is why she does not call, but when she comes, she really comes." I always nodded. I always agreed. I always told myself my job was different. I was the steady one. I was not supposed to need a parade. 3 years before this story, when I was 29, I sat down at my kitchen table on a Saturday afternoon and I made a real plan. I had been quietly investing for 5 years. My grandfather, my father's father, had passed away when I was 24 and had left me a small inheritance, around $40,000, which I had kept untouched because I knew the right purpose for it would arrive someday. I had been saving aggressively at work. I had taken on freelance projects on weekends, building reports for small businesses that paid surprisingly well. I had not bought a new car in 7 years. I had not gone on a real vacation since I was 23. I had eaten beans and rice for so many Tuesday dinners that my coworkers thought I was vegetarian. All of it was pointing toward one goal that I had not even spoken out loud yet. I wanted to give my parents the cottage by the sea, so that Saturday afternoon I opened a spreadsheet and I built a plan with hard numbers. If I kept my income stable, kept side projects going, did not raise my own lifestyle, and used my grandfather's inheritance as a foundation, I could buy a small coastal home outright in about 3 years. No mortgage, no bank holding the deed. Just a clean property, paid in full, that my parents could move into the day they retired. My father had 2 years left on his job at the regional power company. My mother had already been retired from teaching for 4 years. They had a small savings, but not enough to buy a house, and renting near the coast was beyond what they could afford. The house I planned would be a gift, not a loan, not an investment partnership. A gift. I told no one about the plan for 2.5 years. Not my parents, because I wanted it to be a surprise. Not Marlena, because I knew she could not hold a secret if her life depended on it. Not my coworkers, because I did not want anyone to talk me out of it or tell me I was foolish. I worked, I saved. I refused promotions that required moving cities. I cut my own hair for 14 months to save the salon money. I sold my old laptop and used a refurbished one from a coworker who was upgrading. I clipped coupons like my grandmother used to. And one Tuesday morning, 2 years and 10 months after I started, I logged into my account and saw a number that made me sit on the edge of my desk and cry without making any noise. The number was $382,000 and change. Enough for the cottage, plus closing costs, plus furniture, plus a small repair budget, plus a year of property taxes paid in advance so my parents would not have to worry about that bill the first year of retirement. I closed the laptop and I sat on my couch for a long time. Olive jumped up and stepped on my chest and stared at me with her small green eyes and meowed once, like she was asking what was going on. I told her we did it. It felt strange to say we to a cat, but I did not have anyone else to tell. I started the search quietly. I worked with a small realtor in the coastal area, a woman named Pat who was about 60 and wore reading glasses on a chain around her neck. Pat understood me from the first call. I told her I was buying for my parents, that the home had to be 1 floor, with low-maintenance landscaping, with a view of the water in a quiet neighborhood near a grocery store and a doctor. Pat sent me listings for 3 months. I drove up to Pelham Bay 6 times in that period. On the 7th visit, I walked into the soft blue cottage with the white trim, and I knew. The sunroom faced east. There were 2 big windows in the bedroom my mother would use. There was a small carved wooden plaque hanging by the front door that the previous owner had left, and it said, "And the sea remembered them." I almost laughed because it sounded like something my father would say if he had been a poet instead of an electrician. The closing took 2 months. I paid in full. I kept the deed in my own name. I want to say that part again clearly because it becomes important later. The deed was in my name and only my name. I had thought about this carefully. My plan was that my parents would live in the cottage for the rest of their lives, with all expenses covered, all repairs handled, and full freedom to decorate and live as they wished. After they passed away, the house would either go to me or go into a trust I would set up later. The house was a gift of use, a gift of life, a gift of the ocean breeze. It was not a transfer of ownership. I was not trying to be greedy. I was trying to protect them, and to be honest, I was trying to protect myself a little, because part of me, the part that had grown up watching my sister, knew that handing my parents the deed could create a problem someday. I did not know how right that small worry would too. I ran out to be. I planned the surprise for a Sunday. I wanted to drive up early, walk in carrying flowers in the folder of paperwork, and watch my mother's face when she realized that the cottage in the photos I had been thinking about for them was not just a fantasy. I had told them I was looking at a small place near the water that might be a good vacation rental. I had taken my mother through online photos of the cottage 3 weeks before. She had cried at the sunroom. My father had said, "Honey, do not get her hopes up. Places like that are not for people like us." I had smiled at the screen and said nothing. The plan was set. 2 weeks before my surprise, my mother called me one evening and said in a voice that was a little too cheerful, "Honey, your sister is going through a rough patch. Trent lost his job again and they need a place to stay for a little while." Trent was Marlena's husband. He had lost 3 jobs in 5 years, each one due to office politics or bad management. I had heard this song before. I asked my mother where they were thinking of staying. She said, "Oh, we will figure it out. Do not worry about it, sweetheart." I told her I loved her. I hung up. I sat on my couch and did not think much more about it. I should have. That was the first warning, and I let it pass because I was busy planning a surprise. The next warning came 1 week before my surprise. Marlena posted a photo on her social media of a sunset over water. The caption said, "New chapter, new view, blessed beyond words." I scrolled past it. I assumed she had taken it on a trip. I did not zoom in. If I had zoomed in, I would have seen the corner of a soft blue cottage with white trim and a sunroom window catching the orange light. I did not zoom in because it never crossed my mind that she would be inside my parents' future cottage, 3 weeks after I had paid for it, 3 weeks before I had even told my parents it existed. But how would she be there? That is what you must be asking. Let me tell you, because I asked the same question and the answer broke my heart in pieces I did not know I had. About a year before this, my mother had asked me in a casual phone call whether I was thinking about anything big with my savings. I told her vaguely that I was thinking of buying a small place I could let my parents use during summers if they ever wanted a vacation. I did not tell her the full plan. I did not give her an address. I did not give her a town. I gave her one word, coastal, and I said the budget might be in the 300 range, and I said maybe in a year or two. My mother had said, "That is a beautiful idea, honey." I had moved on to the next topic. 2 days later, my mother had called Marlena, and according to what I learned later, my mother had said, "Your sister is buying a cottage by the sea and we're all going to use it." I learned later that Marlena had immediately started talking about it as if the cottage already existed and as if she had a guaranteed claim to it. This is what I learned later, after I walked through the door that Sunday morning. When I pulled up to the cottage that day, the gravel driveway already had 2 cars in it. One was my parents' old gray sedan, the other was Marlena's white SUV. I felt my stomach drop, but I told myself it could be a coincidence. Maybe my parents had decided to drive up into the area, maybe Marlena had tagged along. I had texted my mother the night before, "Are you home tomorrow morning? I want to come see you with a surprise." She had answered, "Yes, honey, we will be home all day." So I had assumed they would be at their house, 2 hours south of Pelham Bay. They were not. They were at the cottage, without my permission, without my knowledge, without my key. Because of course my mother had a key because I had mailed her one a month earlier telling her that I might want her opinion on the place soon. I parked behind the SUV. I sat in my car for a full minute. I made myself breathe. I told myself there was a logical explanation. I picked up the bouquet of yellow daisies I had bought in town, and I picked up the cream-colored folder with the deed, the welcome letter, the spare keys, and a handwritten note from my parents that began, "Mom and Dad, this is yours." I walked up the wood path. I stopped when I heard music coming from inside. It was a cheerful playlist my sister always used at her house parties, the same songs she had played at her 30th birthday 2 years before. I could hear voices laughing. I could hear my mother's voice laughing. I could hear children's feet running across the wood floors. I had not invited children to the surprise. There were no children in my parents' house. There were no children in our family yet except Marlena's 2 boys. I stood at the door for a long moment, then I opened it. The smell hit me first. Fresh paint, a kind of rose smell, my sister's perfume, candles, and the buttery smell of food. The living room had been rearranged. The couch I had picked out, a soft gray sectional, had been pushed against a different wall. A pink rug I had never seen before covered most of the wood floor. Children's toys were scattered around the corner near the sunroom. A bouncy chair I recognized as Marlena's youngest son's was set up by the window. On the wall near the kitchen, someone had hung a wooden sign that said, "The Whitmore Family Coast House." Marlena's last name was Whitmore. My last name was not. I felt my body go still. The kind of still that is not calm, the kind of still that happens before your brain decides whether to scream or run. I held the daisies in one hand and the folder in the other. The folder shook slightly. I made it stop. My mother came around the corner from the kitchen. She was wearing a yellow apron I had never seen. She had a wine glass in one hand. She froze when she saw me. For a second I saw something on her face that I cannot forget. It was not surprise. It was not joy. It was guilt. The kind of guilt a child has when you walk in and they have been doing something they were told not to do. Her face turned bright when she controlled it, but I had already seen the first second. "Ackles, honey, what are you doing here?" my mother said in a voice that was a half tone too high. I tried to speak normally. I think my voice did the right thing. "Mom, I told you I was coming with a surprise." "I thought you meant tomorrow," she said. I had said Sunday. It was Sunday. Behind her, my sister Marlena walked out of the kitchen holding a tray of cheese and crackers. She wore a long flowing white dress, the kind people wear in catalog pictures of beach houses. She had a flower tucked behind her ear. Her hair was longer than I remembered. She stopped, looked at me, and burst into a wide, bright smile. "Oh my God, Ackles, you came too. This is so perfect. We were going to call you tonight." I did not move. "Call me about what?" Marlena laughed like I had just told a joke. "About all of this, about the house. Mom and Dad have been telling me how amazing it is here, and Trent and I we needed a fresh start. You know how it has been. So we're staying for a while and we're turning it into a little family place. You are going to love what I am doing with the second bedroom. I am painting it sage green. It is going to be everything." I think I forgot how to breathe for a second, not because of what she said, but because of how she said it, as if I were a guest. As if I had walked into her home and she was telling me about her renovations. I looked at my mother. My mother had taken a small step closer to Marlena, the way a parent stands closer to a child they are protecting. My mother smiled at me, the kind of smile she used when she wanted me to nod and not ask questions. "It is so nice, Ackles. Just go and look at the bedrooms. You will see your sister has such taste." I did not look at the bedrooms. I looked at my father, who had now appeared in the doorway between the sunroom and the living room. He was wearing his old fishing hat. He had a glass of something in his hand. He gave me a small, slow nod. He did not say hello. I was about to speak when a child came running out of the back hallway, Marlena's older son, who was 6, shouting, "Auntie Marlena, Mommy, the seashell is broken." Marlena turned and laughed and went toward him. My mother turned with her. The kitchen door closed. I stood in the living room with the daisies and the folder. My father was still in the doorway. I walked toward him slowly, carefully. "Dad," I said, "what is happening?" My father looked at the floor, then he looked at me. He had brown eyes the same color as mine. He had given me those eyes. He had also given me my stubborn streak, which I was about to use. "Honey," he said in the voice he used when he was trying to make peace, "your mother and your sister have been so excited. We thought, since you said the place was for the family, that maybe Marlena could stay here while she gets back on her feet. It is just for a few months. You know how Trent has been struggling." I lowered my voice. Dad, I have not given the house to anyone. I have not even told you it is bought. How are they here? He blinked at me. Your mother said you bought it last month. She said you wanted to surprise us today. That is right, I said. Today, not last month. How are they already living in it? My father opened his mouth. He closed it. He opened it again. He said, your mother gave Marlena the key 2 weeks ago. The folder felt very heavy in my hand. The daisies felt very light. I want you to understand, because I want you to feel what I felt at that moment, that my mother had gone behind my back, accepted the existence of a house she was not supposed to know about yet, copied or taken the key I had mailed her in confidence, and given that key to my sister, who had moved her entire family in before I had even been allowed to drive up and hand my in TS the deed myself. My mother had stolen my surprise. My sister had stolen my house. My father had let it happen, and then my mother walked back into the room, smiling brightly, holding her wine glass, and said, honey, why do not you put down those flowers and come help me set the table for lunch? It is going to be such a beautiful afternoon. Marlena made a roast. I looked at my mother. I really looked at her. The way you look at a stranger who has just stepped on your foot. I said, whose name did Marlena tell her friends was on this house? My mother's smile flickered. Oh, honey, do not start. This is a celebration. Whose name? I said again. The room got quiet. Marlena, who had come back into the room with 2 more guests behind her, 2 women I did not know, friends of hers I assumed, also went quiet. The 2 friends looked between us. They looked uncomfortable. They looked at the wooden sign over the kitchen that said, the Whitmore Family Coast House. Honey, my mother said softly, these are Marlena's friends, please. Whose name? I said for the 3rd time. Did Marlena tell people was on this house? Marlena set down the cheese tray. She straightened her flowing white dress. She smiled, but her eyes were sharp. Ackles, can we please not do this in front of company? I asked a question, I said. There was a pause. Then one of Marlena's friends, a woman with red hair and a kind face, said carefully, she told us this was her and Trent's place. She said her sister helped a little with the down payment. The folder in my hand felt as if it weighed 100 pounds. I felt my face stay still. I felt my heart go very loud. I felt the part of me that had spent 10 years saving for this morning step quietly to the front of my chest and lock its arms. I took one slow breath. I looked at my mother, and I looked at my sister, and I looked at my father, who had now sat down on the couch as if his legs would not hold him. I said in a voice that was steady, I did not help with the down payment. I bought this house in full with my own money last month. The deed is in my name, the keys are mine, the taxes are paid by me. My parents have permission to live here for the rest of their lives free of charge. No one else does. No one else was ever invited. The 2 friends looked at each other. The red-haired one set down her drink. The other one took a small step toward the door. Marlena's bright smile cracked at the corners. My mother's hand began to shake. The wine in her glass made a small ripple. Honey, my mother said softly, let us not do this here. Please, please, we can talk about this later. The girls have come a long way. The girls, I said, are welcome to leave. Marlena's friends did not need to be told twice. The red-haired one said very politely, we are so sorry, we did not know, and they collected their bags and walked out. The screen door clicked behind them. The music kept playing. A song about coming home to where you belong. The 5 of us, me, my mother, my father, my sister, and somewhere in the back of the house, Marlena's husband Trent and her 2 children were now in a silence I could feel against my skin. Marlena recovered first. She always did. She tilted her head soft and sad and said, Ackles, why would you embarrass me like that? Those were my friends. I did not embarrass you, I said. You embarrassed yourself when you told them this house was yours. She laughed a small, hurt laugh. Oh, come on, you said you bought a place for the family. We are family. I told them it was a family place. They misunderstood. I tilted my head back at her. You told them in your own words that the house was yours and Trent's. Your friend just repeated it. The sign on the wall says the Whitmore Family Coast House. I am not a Whitmore. She did not answer. She looked at our mother. Our mother looked at the floor. I turned to my mother. Mom. Did you tell Marlena this house was for her? My mother's voice was very small. I told her she could stay here while she got back on her feet. For how long? As long as she needed. And in front of her friends, did you go along with the story that this house was hers? There was a pause. My mother nodded once, a tiny movement. Why, I said, my mother's eyes filled. Because, honey, your sister has been going through so much. Trent does not feel like a man right now. The boys need stability. I thought if you bought a place for the family, then Marlena should have somewhere to land. You are doing so well, Ackles. You do not need a place by the water. You have your apartment. You have your career. Your sister has nothing right now. I felt my face go warm, not red, warm like a fire that has been building for years had just been given air. I have my career, I said quietly, because I worked for it. I have my apartment because I have lived in the same 1 bedroom since I was 22 so that I could save the money I just spent on this cottage. I bought this cottage. G for you and Dad, not for Marlena, not for Trent, not for the boys, for you, so that Dad could finally smell salt water, so that you could sit in a sunroom and read your books. That is what this was. My mother was crying now. Quietly, tears slid down her cheeks. But honey, if you bought it for us, then we get to choose who stays in it, do we not? I stared at her. It was the cleanest sentence she had ever said to me. The most honest she had ever been about how she saw our relationship. Whatever I gave her was hers, and once it was hers to give to my sister. I want to pause here because if you are anything like me, you might be feeling a heat behind your eyes right now. I felt that same heat, but I did not let it spill. I held the folder. I held the daisy. I made my voice very even. No, Mom, I said, you do not get to choose. The house is in my name. You and Dad can live here as long as you wish as a gift from me, but you cannot give my house to anyone else. It is not yours to give. There was a long silence, then my mother said the sentence that ended the part of my heart that had still been hoping. She said, if you take this from your sister, you will break this family. I looked at her. I looked at my father, who would not look up. I looked at Marlena, who had already crossed her arms and was wearing a small triumphant smile because she knew that line worked on me, because that line had always worked on me. I did not answer. I set the daisies on the small table by the door. I tucked the folder under my arm. I said, I am going to drive into town and have lunch. I am going to come back at 4 o'clock. Trent's car, Marlena's car, and all of the children's belongings will be out of this house by then, or I will call the police and report the trespass. Mom and Dad, you may stay or leave, that is your choice. I walked out. I did not slam the door, I closed it gently. Olive, I thought ridiculously, would have been proud of me. Olive valued quiet exits. I sat in my car. I did not start the engine. I rested my forehead against the steering wheel. I did not cry. The crying part of me had stepped back inside its room and shut the door. The clear, cold, careful part of me, the part that built spreadsheets, the part that had saved for 10 years, the part that read the fine print, the part that kept the deed in my own name, that part was now in charge. I did 3 things while I sat in that car. I called my realtor, Pat, who was 60 and wore reading glasses on a chain. I told her in a level voice that I needed her advice on changing the locks on the cottage that afternoon. She told me she had a friend, a locksmith, who could be there in 2 hours. I thanked her. I called my best friend Hadley, who was a paralegal at a real estate firm in the city. She was the only person I had told the full plan to 2 years before, because I had needed someone outside my family to keep. I told her in a level voice that my sister had moved into the cottage with my mother's help and was telling people the cottage belonged to her. Hadley said, I am driving up. Tell me where to meet you. Do not sign anything. Do not say anything more than you have to. Do you have the deed with you in physical form? I said yes. She said, bring it. We are going to fix this. The third thing I did was the hardest. I sat there in the car for 3 more minutes, and I let myself remember every time my mother had made me feel like the price of being loved was being useful. The Christmas when I was 9, when I gave her a handmade book of coupons that said things like good for 1 breakfast in bed, and Marlena gave her a candle she had bought with my mother's own money, and my mother hugged Marlena and said, oh, sweetheart, this is such a thoughtful gift, and put my book on the side table where it sat for 2 years until it was thrown out. The night when I was 19 and helped my mother get through the worst flu of her life, sleeping on the floor of her room for 3 nights, only to hear her tell my aunt on the phone, I really do not know what I would do without Marlena, she's such a comfort. The wedding I never had because I was busy paying off Marlena's first car, which she totaled within 4 months. The birthday cards that read to my baby girl for my sister and to a wonderful daughter for me. Wonderful was a long word. Baby was a short word. Short words were more loved. I let myself remember all of it. I let it sit. I let it breathe. And then I started the car. I drove to a small diner in Pelham Bay called Midge's. I ordered a coffee and a piece of pie. I ate slowly. I watched the door of the diner. After about 40 minutes, Hadley arrived. She had driven like a maniac. She slid into the booth across from me. She had her work bag with her, the big one with the file folders. She had brought a notepad. She had brought a calm look on her face that I had only ever seen her use when she was furious in a professional way. Why? Walk me through it from the beginning, she said. I did. When I finished, Hadley laid out 3 rules for me on her notepad, and I am going to keep this in paragraph form like she would, because Hadley always spoke in clean sentences. She said, first, the deed in your name is your strongest shield, which means as long as you do not transfer ownership, no one can take this house from you legally. Second, your mother handing your sister a key without your permission is a betrayal of trust, but it is not the same as legal transfer. Your sister is technically a guest of a guest, which is a fancy way of saying she has no legal right to be there once you withdraw permission. Third, you are about to do the hardest thing you have ever done, because you are about to refuse to be the family ATM and emotional servant in front of people who have built their identities around being able to use you. Be ready, because they are going to fight back, and they are going to fight dirty. I asked her what dirty looked like. Hadley said in a low voice, they are going to call you greedy. They are going to call you cold. They are going to remind you of every favor anyone ever did for you. They might cry. Your mother might say things she has never said before. Your sister might pretend to suddenly love you. Trent might threaten in some small way. And your father, from what you have told me about him, is going to disappear into himself and pretend he is not here. You need to know all of that is coming, and you need to know that none of it changes the deed. I nodded. I felt steadier. Hadley reached across the table. She put her hand on mine. She said, Ackles, listen to me. You did not do anything wrong by buying that house. You are not breaking the family. The family broke itself a long time ago. You are just turning on the light. We left the diner. We drove back to the cottage. The locksmith, a quiet man named Greg, was already in the driveway waiting in his van. It was 3:45. The 2 cars were still there, my parents' sedan and Marlena's white SUV. I knocked on my own front door. Inside the cottage, my own front door, it took 30 seconds before my mother opened it. She had been crying. She looked tiny. They will not leave, she whispered. Behind her in the living room, Marlena was sitting on the gray sectional with her 2 boys watching cartoons on a tablet. Trent, my brother-in-law, was standing by the kitchen with his arms crossed. He was a tall man with thin shoulders, and he was always trying to look bigger than he was. I stepped inside with Hadley behind me. The locksmith waited at the door. I looked at Trent. I had not seen him since Christmas. He had grown a thin beard. He looked like someone who had practiced his line. He spoke first. Ackles, look, we need to have a conversation about this. You came in earlier and made a scene. You upset Marlena. You upset your mother. We are family. There is no need for this drama. We are going to work this out. I said, there is nothing to work out, Trent. You have an hour to pack the children's things and leave. The same goes for Marlena. I am not negotiating. Trent took a step closer. Listen, you have plenty of money, all right. You make how much? Like $100 grand a year. You bought a beach house. We get it. Good for you, but Marlena has nothing. The boys have nothing. You are going to throw your sister's children out on the street. I looked at him. I looked at my nephews, who were 6 and 3, watching a singing dinosaur on the tablet. I felt a sharp pain for them because none of this was their fault. But I also looked at Trent and saw a man who had used his children as a card his whole adult life, played whenever he needed leverage. Trent, I said, you have a perfectly fine house 2 hours from here. Your house is paid for, by the way, because it was a wedding gift from Marlena's grandfather. The boys have bedrooms in that house. You are not throwing the children on the street by going home. You are going home, he blinked. He had not expected me to know about the grandfather's gift. I knew about it because I had helped Marlena fill out paperwork for the property transfer when I was 24 and she was 20. I had been the responsible older sister. I remembered everything. That was always going to be a problem for them. Marlena spoke from the couch. Her voice was sweeter than honey. Ackles, sweetie, you are angry. I get it. I do. I should have asked you, but Mom said you would not mind. Mom said you said this was for the family. Please, just sit down. Let us have a glass of wine. Let us talk like sisters. I did not sit down. Marlena, you told your friends this house was yours. You hung a sign on the wall with your last name on it. You moved your furniture in. You painted the second bedroom. This was not a misunderstanding. You were planning to live here, and you were planning to make Mom and Dad pay the price for it, including, I am guessing, the cost of getting my name off the deed eventually. Her face changed, just a flicker, a small dropping at the corner of her mouth. I had guessed right. I turned to my mother. Mom, I am going to ask you one question. I want you to think very hard before you answer it. Did Marlena tell you to ask me about my plans for the cottage? Did she ask you to find out the address? Did she ask you to get a copy of the key? My mother began to cry harder. Honey, please, you do not understand. Mom, yes or no? She did not answer. I turned to my father, who was sitting on the small chair by the sunroom. He was looking at his shoes. He had been silent the whole time. Dad, I said, what did Mom tell you about the house? My father swallowed. She told me, he said quietly, that you had agreed Marlena could stay here while Trent looked for work. And when she told you that, did you ask her if she had spoken to me directly about it? My father did not answer for a long moment. Then he said very quietly, no, honey, I did not. I am sorry. I do not know exactly why my father's small, honest answer made my eyes sting more than anything else that day. Maybe because it was the first crack in the wall. Maybe because he was the one I had always assumed was being protected from the truth, and instead he was the one who had quietly chosen not to look at it. Maybe because I was 32 and I was finally hearing my father admit, out loud in front of everyone, that he had let my mother build a story around me without asking me. I took a breath. I made my voice as kind as I could, because in that moment my anger had passed through a doorway and become something steadier. Dad, I said, I love you. I bought this house so you could smell salt water. I want you to live here for the rest of your life. There is a sunroom that faces east. There is a soft chair in the corner. The waves are loud at night. I bought this for you, but I will not allow this house to become a place where your daughter and your son-in-law lie about owning what I paid for. Tell me you understand. My father nodded. He could not speak. I turned to Marlena. You have 1 hour. The locksmith is in the driveway. He starts at 5. After 5, my key is the only key. If you are still in this house at 5:15, I will call the police and report you for trespass. I will bring out the deed. I will show them the receipts. I will let them sort it out. You are my sister. I love you. I am also done. Marlena went very still, then she said the line she always used. If you do this, I will never speak to you again. I looked at her. I had heard that line 100 times. I had folded under that line 100 times. The line was a door she opened to make me run back into the room. I said, okay, just one word. She did not have a follow-up. She had not prepared for okay. She had only ever prepared for please do not. I walked into the kitchen. I unhung the sign that said the Whitmore Family Coast House. I did not throw it. I set it gently on the counter. I walked back into the living room. I sat down on the gray sectional on the side that Marlena was not sitting on. I waited. For the next 45 minutes the cottage filled with the sounds of leaving. Marlena cried. Her boys did not understand what was happening. Trent loaded their car loudly on purpose, slamming the trunk every time. My mother tried twice to come over to me to whisper an excuse. I shook my head both times. My father went out to the back deck and did not move until the cars were loaded. The locksmith waited politely in the driveway. At 5 o'clock exactly, Marlena, Trent, the 2 boys, the bouncy chair, the pink rug, and the candles were gone. The white SUV pulled out of the driveway. Marlena did not look at me as they left. Her oldest son waved at me through the back window. I waved back. I felt that wave in my chest for a long time. Greg, the locksmith, came in. He did the front door, the back door, and the sunroom door in 40 minutes. He handed me 4 new keys. I gave one to my father. I gave one to my mother. I kept 2. My mother looked at the key in her hand. She held it like it was something fragile. She did not say anything. My father came and stood beside her. He put his hand on her shoulder. He looked at me, I said very gently, you can stay here tonight. You can stay here every night for the rest of your life. The cottage is a gift to you, both of you. But the lie that this was Marlena's house ends today. If you cannot agree to that, you and I are going to have a different kind of relationship. My mother nodded. She was still crying. I drove home that night 6 hours in the dark. Hadley drove behind me in her car for the first 2 hours, then she peeled off when our routes split. Olive met me at the apartment door. She climbed onto my chest as soon as I sat down on the couch. I did not cry until after I had fed her, then I cried for about an hour, and then I ate cereal at midnight and slept for 10 hours, I thou. GHT for one foolish week that the worst was over. It was not 3 days later my mother called me. Her voice was warm in a way I did not trust. She said, honey, Marlena is so hurt. She is talking about therapy. She wants to meet with you. We all need to sit down and have a family conversation. Maybe we can come to your apartment next Saturday. I told her I needed time. She called the next day, and the next. Every call was a little softer, a little more patient on the surface, a little more pressing underneath. By the end of the week she had told me twice that people are starting to ask questions and the family is worried about you. Notice the word you. I was the one being worried about. I was the one acting strange. I was the one upsetting the family. I let the calls go to voicemail for a week. On day 8, I got a different kind of call. It was from a man named Bert Halsey, an attorney whose name I did not recognize, calling from a small firm 2 towns from where Marlena lived. He left a polite voicemail. He said, hello, Ms. Ackles, this is Bert Halsey. I am reaching out on behalf of Marlena and Trent Whitmore regarding a property in Pelham Bay. We would like to set up a conversation about beneficial interest. Please call my office at your convenience. Beneficial interest. I called Hadley before I called him back. Hadley said, send me his number, send me his firm, do not call him, I will call him. She called me back 2 hours later. Her voice was the same calm, furious voice from the diner. She said, Ackles, sit down. Your sister is claiming that you and she had a verbal agreement that the cottage was a joint family asset and that her family contributed. She is also alleging that your mother contributed to the down payment. She is laying the foundation to argue that she has equitable interest. It is not going to work, it is paper thin, but she is doing it. She has hired a real attorney, she's serious. I asked Hadley how Marlena could afford an attorney. Hadley said, either Trent's parents are paying or your parents are paying. I felt my stomach turn. Hadley, I said, can you find out? She said, give me 3 days. I want to skip ahead just slightly because I do not want to make this part feel like a courtroom show. The truth turned out to be both predictable and stunning. Hadley made some calls. She knew people. She also asked me a careful question. She asked, Ackles, how long have you been sending money to your parents? I said 7 years, $600 a month, sometimes more. She asked, where is the money going? I told her into their household, into my mother's account. She said, pull every transaction you can. I want a list. Tell me anything you remember sending more for. Tell me birthdays. Tell me bills. Tell me trips. I sat down at my kitchen table that night with 3 years of bank statements, and I made a clean record of every dollar I had sent to my parents since I was 25. The total, when I added it up, was about $72,000. $72,000 over 7 years. Quiet, monthly, dependable. Hadley met me in the city the next weekend. We went over the records. She made notes. She asked me about specific months, about specific amounts. She asked, did your mother ever say what big things she spent it on? I said, no, mostly she said little things, the dishwasher, the car, doctor visits. Hadley took a slow breath. Ackles, I am going to ask you to do something hard. I want you to look at your sister's social media for the last 7 years and write down anything you can find about big expenses your sister had. New cars, vacations, cosmetic procedure, sudden help with rent. I want dates. I asked her why. She said, because I have a hunch. I spent 2 evenings making the list. I wrote down everything I could find. Marlena had posted a photo of a brand new SUV when I was 27. Marlena had taken the boys to a resort in the Caribbean when I was 29. Marlena had announced the most amazing dental work and shown her new smile when I was 30. Trent had bought a small fishing boat the year I was 31. Marlena had hosted a 30th birthday extravaganza with 100 guests at a venue. The list went on. I sent it to Hadley. Hadley sent back a 1-line email. It said, your money. I stared at those 2 words for a long time. I want to be careful here because I cannot tell you with absolute certainty that every dollar I sent my parents went to Marlena. I do not have complete records. But Hadley, who knew how to read patterns, was confident that a large portion of the money I had sent my parents over 7 years had been quietly handed to my sister. The dishwasher was real. The doctor visits were real. But the big sudden expenses on Marlena's side often happened the same weeks my mother had asked me gently by phone for a little extra this month, sweetheart. I had been the unknown line of credit on my sister's life. Now you might think this is where I exploded. It is not. Something different happened. I went very still for a few days. I went to work, I did my job, I came home, I fed Olive, I sat on my couch, I did not cry, I did not call anyone. I let the truth settle into the floor of my body. Because once a thing is true, you only need to feel it once. After that, you have to plan. Here's what I planned. I asked Hadley to refer me to a real estate and family law attorney. She did. Her name was Dora Whitfield. Dora was in her early 50s, had short gray hair, and wore glasses that were a little too big for her face. The first meeting with Dora lasted 2 hours. I told her everything. She took notes in small, precise handwriting. At the end, she said, Ackles, you have done a lot of things right. The deed is in your name. The funds came from your accounts. You have a paper trail for every dollar. The cottage is yours, not in dispute. What we need to do now is build a few protections, and then we need to make a clear decision about how to handle your family going forward. Do you want to fight your sister, or do you want to remove yourself from her reach? I said, I want to remove myself. Dora nodded. Good, fights are loud and slow, removal is quiet and fast. We drew up 3 documents over the next 2 weeks. The first was a clear written license agreement giving my parents the right to live in the Pelham Bay cottage rent-free for the rest of their lives, in exchange for keeping the property in good condition and following a few simple rules, including no permanent guests, no subletting, no transfers of interest, and no changes of locks without my approval. They could refuse to sign it. If they did, they would be welcome to live in the cottage anyway, but I would simply rent out the second bedroom to vacationers, and that would be that. The second was a clean letter terminating any further monthly financial support to my parents' household. I would still help them in true emergencies. I would still pay for property taxes and major repairs at the cottage. But the $600 a month transfer was done. The third was a short, calm, written statement to my sister and her attorney. It said in plain language that there was no verbal agreement, no joint contribution, and no equitable interest. It said that any further attempts to claim ownership or partial ownership of the cottage would be referred to my attorney and pursued. It was 3 paragraphs. It was polite. It did not raise its voice. Dora signed it as my counsel. I delivered all 3 on the same week. I drove up to Pelham Bay that Friday with the license agreement. My parents had been living in the cottage for almost a month at that point in the new lock period in the aftertime. I did not call ahead. I knocked. My father opened the door. He looked older than he had a month before. Hi, Dad, I said. He stepped aside without speaking. My mother was in the sunroom knitting something. She had taken up knitting since the move. Her hands stopped when she saw me. I sat down at the kitchen table. They both joined me. I put the license agreement in front of them. I read it out loud. I did not raise my voice. I did not explain. I just read it. When I finished, my mother said, Honey, this feels so cold. I said, Mom, I'm giving you a beautiful house to live in for the rest of your life. The license agreement is what makes that gift safe from future arguments. It protects you and it protects me. My father picked up the pen. He signed. My mother looked at him. He nodded at her gently. She signed too. Her hand was shaking. Then I put the second document in front of them. I read it. Their faces changed. Ackles, my mother said, we depend on that money. I said, I know. I have been depending on you to be honest about where it went. We have both let each other down. From now on, you keep your finances in your own household. If there is a true emergency, I am here. The monthly transfer ends at the end of this calendar month. My mother's eyes filled. Why are you punishing us? Why now? I said, Mom. I know about Marlena's car. I know about Marlena's dental work. I know about Marlena's resort trip. I know about the boat. I know there were months you asked me for extra and the extra went to Marlena. I am not asking you to confirm it. I do not need you to confirm it. I am asking you to stop pretending it did not happen because you live in a cottage I bought and the relationship has to be different now. My father put his face in his hands. My mother began to cry. I never meant for it to be like this. Marlena has always needed more help. You were always so strong. I thought you have so much and she has so little. I did not think it would matter to you. You never asked questions. I thought you understood. I want to tell you because this is one of the most important things I learned, that the silence of a strong person is often used as an excuse for the cruelty of others. I had been quiet. I had not questions, so they had decided I had no questions. They had decided I had no needs. They had decided that strong meant willing to be used. I said, Mom, strong does not mean I do not feel it. It just means I do not yell about it. She nodded. She did not have an answer. The next day I sent the third document, the one from Marlena and her attorney. I sent it through Dora. Marlena's attorney called Dora within 24 hours. After 2 short calls, Marlena's attorney withdrew. Hadley had been right. The case was paper thin. The man had probably warned my sister from the beginning. He had taken her money, but he had not been willing to lose his license over it. The phone calls from Marlena started 2 weeks later. She did not call to say sorry. She called to say I had ruined her life. She called to say her boys were going to be evicted because the rent on their house had gone up. She called to say I was selfish. She called to say I had taken Mom and Dad away from her. She called to say in a wild voice on a Tuesday afternoon, I hope you are happy in your sad little apartment with your sad little cat. You were never going to be loved anyway. That was always your problem. I did not answer. I let her say everything she had to say into my voicemail. I listened to one of those messages once. Then I forwarded all of them to Dora just in case I ever needed them. Then I blocked her number. A funny thing happened after I blocked her. The world got quieter. Not in a sad way, in a real way. The way a refrigerator that has been humming for years finally goes silent and you notice the silence as much as you notice the hum. For the next 3 months I did almost nothing dramatic. I went to work, I came home, I took long walks. I started cooking real meals again, not bean and rice survival meals, but actual dishes with vegetables I had picked out. I bought myself one nice thing, a soft wool coat, the first new coat I had bought in 11 years. I drove up to the cottage once a month to check on the property. I did not stay overnight. I did not eat a meal there. I treated it as a property visit. My parents and I were polite and careful with each other. My father took me on walks along the water during those visits. He pointed out birds. We did not talk about Marlena. He did not say sorry in those words, but he reached for my hand once on the path and held it for about 20 seconds, and I understood that the hand holding was the apology he had been trying to find since the moment he had first nodded at me from the doorway. My mother changed more slowly. At first she was cold to me, then she was watchful, then she was small and embarrassed. Then around month 4 she began to talk to me again. Real talk. She told me one Sunday afternoon in the sunroom where she did her knitting, "Honey, I have spent all of my life thinking that loving someone meant making them happy. I am beginning to see I have not really loved anyone. I have just been managing them." I did not answer that. I just took her hand. We sat there for a while. Now I want to tell you about the consequence that came from Marlena, because no story like this is honest without it. Marlena and Trent did not lose their house. The grandfather's gift had paid it off. They did, however, lose what I think of as their power supply. For years, they had been able to spend more than they earned because my parents had been able to give more than they had. With the monthly transfer ended, my parents had to live within their actual means, which were modest. They could no longer slide a few $100s to Marlena every time she had a small crisis. Within 6 months, Marlena and Trent had to make hard choices they had never made before. Marlena got a part-time job at a real estate office. It was, I learned much later, the first job she had held longer than a year since she was 24. Trent, to my surprise, found work as well. A friend of my father's owned a small contracting company and hired him as a project assistant. Trent did not love the job, but he kept it because it turned out he could keep a job when there was no one else to fall back on. The boys went to a more affordable school. Marlena was, I am told, deeply unhappy for about a year. She lost weight. She gained it back. She lost some friends, the ones who had only liked her when she had a coast house. She kept the ones who had liked her without one, which turned out to be a smaller and more honest circle. She did not call me again after the second month. She did not write. The silence between us became its own kind of fact. Now here is the part that surprised me most. About 14 months after the day I walked into the cottage, my father called me on a Tuesday afternoon. He sounded better than he had in years. Not because everything was perfect, but because something inside him had loosened. He said, "Honey, your mother and I would like to drive down and take you to dinner this Saturday. There is something we want to give you." I said yes. They drove down on Saturday. They picked me up at my apartment. Olive watched them from the windowsill. They took me to a small Italian restaurant I had liked since I was a girl. After we had ordered, my father reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small envelope. He slid it across the table to me. I opened it. Inside was a check from my parents' joint account. The check was made out to me. The amount was $12,000. I looked at my father. He said, "Your mother and I have been talking. We sat down and we made a list of every big purchase your sister and her family made that we helped with. We added up what we could remember. We know the number is bigger than this. We know we cannot pay you back what you sent us so much, but we wanted to give you this as a beginning. Your mother and I are going to send you a small amount every month until we get to something that feels honest. We are not asking you to forgive us. We are asking you to let us try." I did not cry at the table. I did not want to cry at the table. I held the check. I looked at my mother. She was looking at me with eyes that were not hiding anything. For the first time in my adult life, I said, "Dad, you do not need to pay me back. I gave that money. It was a gift." My father said, "It was a gift because you are a good daughter, sweetheart. We are giving this back because we are trying to learn how to be better parents." I let myself cry a little after that. Quiet tears. The waiter pretended not to notice. I accepted the check. I knew that turning it down would be turning down a chance for my parents to grow. The money mattered less than the act. I told them I would put it toward the cottage's first major repair, which I needed to do that fall on the roof. They smiled at that. My father said, "Then we are paying for our own roof." That is fitting. A year and a half after the day I walked in, my mother and father quietly invited me up to the cottage for a long weekend. I went. I stayed in the second bedroom, the one Marlena had once painted sage green and I had repainted soft cream the year before. The bed had clean white sheets. There was a small wooden plaque hanging on the wall above the bed. My father had carved it. It said, "This room belongs to Ackles." I stared at it for a long time. I did not say anything to my father about it. He did not say anything about it to me. That was enough. On Sunday morning of that weekend, I woke up early and walked down to the water. The sun had not yet come up over the line of the sea. The salt smell was thick. I sat on the bench at the edge of the dunes. I thought about the 11-year-old girl who had heard her father say that ocean smell made him feel like a king. I thought about the 32-year-old woman who had stood in that doorway one morning with a folder and a bouquet of yellow daisies and almost lost herself in a single laugh from the kitchen. I thought about all the Ackles who had lived between those two girls. I let them all sit on that bench with me for a while, then I walked back to the cottage. My father had made coffee. My mother was in the sunroom reading. The radio was on low. The whole house smelled like warm bread. My mother looked up. She said, "Good morning, sweetheart. Did the waves wake you up?" I said, "Yes, Mom, they did, in a good way." She smiled. She went back to her book. The world was quieter than it had ever been, and for the first time in my whole life I understood something I had been trying to understand for 32 years. You cannot earn love by being useful. You can only be loved if the people around you choose to see you when you are not lifting anything for them. If they only see you when your hands are full, they do not love you. They love the thing in your hands. And the only way to find out which one it is to set the thing down and see who stays. My parents stayed. My sister did not. I made my peace with both of those facts. I have told you the main shape of what happened. There are smaller pieces I have not told you about because there are always smaller pieces. There was the Christmas after the cottage day, the first holiday in our family with Marlena absent, when my mother set 5 plates at the table out of habit, then quietly removed 2, set them in the cupboard, and came back to the table without saying a word. There was the night my aunt called me my father's sister, who had always quietly seen what was happening in our family, and who told me in a voice that broke a little, "Honey, I have been waiting 20 years for you to do what you did. I am sorry I never said anything. I am proud of you." There was the morning a small package arrived at my apartment with no return address, and inside was the wooden plaque that had hung in the cottage when I bought it, the one that said, "And the sea remembered them." My father had taken it down and mailed it to me. It hangs by my front door now. I see it every time I leave for work. And there was, about 2 years after the cottage day, a single quiet moment in a grocery store about a mile from my apartment, when I turned a corner with a basket on my arm and walked straight into Marlena. We both froze. She had her younger son with her. He had grown a lot. He looked at me and said, "Auntie Ackles." He remembered me. I felt something in my throat. He came forward and hugged my leg. Marlena did not stop him. She and I stood there for about 10 seconds. Neither of us spoke. Then she said, in a voice I had never heard from her before, a voice with no smile in it and no demand, "Hi, Ackles." I said, "Hi, Marlena." She looked at her son. She looked at me. She said, "I am sorry." That was all. No story, no explanation, no request. I said, "Thank you." That was all. No forgiveness speech. No promise of a future relationship. No throwing my arms around her and saying it was all okay, because it was not all okay, and I had finally learned that pretending was the most expensive thing I had ever done. She took her son's hand. She walked away. I finished my shopping. I went home. I sat on my couch. Olive, who had grown old by then, climbed up and put her head on my chest. I petted her for a long time. I did not feel triumphant. I did not feel sad. I felt for once like a complete person who had a complete past and a complete present and a complete future, all in the same body, all at the same time. That was the gift. Not the cottage, not the money, not the court documents, not the apology checks, not even my sister's 2 soft words in the cereal aisle. The gift was the version of me that learned, on a Sunday morning in a doorway, that some surprises are not the ones we plan, and that the people who love us are not always the people who are supposed to. If you have been waiting at a door yourself, holding something heavy for people who are laughing on the other side, I want you to know that walking in is not the only choice, and walking away is not the only choice, and sitting down on the porch and crying is not the only choice. You can walk in, see the truth clearly, set the thing down, and decide for yourself who deserves to follow you back out. You do not need permission to love yourself enough to stop carrying. You do not need a courtroom. You do not need a speech. You just need to be willing to look the people you love in the eye and say in a calm voice the cleanest sentence I have ever learned to say: "This is mine. I am keeping it. You are welcome here, but only on the truth." That is the sentence that changed my life. I keep that sentence written on a small card in my wallet now. I read it sometimes when I am about to do something kind for someone who has not earned a kind thing in a long time. It does not mean I do not help people. It means I help them for the right reasons, with my eyes open. The cottage is still in my name. My parents still live there. My father walks along the water every morning. He's 67 now. He says the salt air has added years to his lungs. My mother knits in the sunroom. She has made me 3 sweaters. She has made Marlena none, which is not a punishment, only a fact, because I am the daughter who calls. She and I talk on the phone every Sunday for 40 minutes. We talk about books and about the cottage's flower beds and about the small cracks she finds in herself as she gets older, the cracks where the truth has begun to come in. She has not asked for forgiveness in words. I have not given it in words. We are doing it the way we know how, in the small choices we make every week. That counts. Slowly that counts. I have not seen Marlena since the grocery store. I do not know if I ever will again. I do not know if she will ever fully understand what she did, or if she will spend the rest of her life telling herself a different version of the story to survive it. I have made my peace with not knowing. Some questions in your life are not yours to answer. Some peace in your life is not yours to give. Some doors you walk away from for good reasons, and the goodness of the reasons does not disappear if no one ever opens the door from the other side. I do not feel like a hero. I do not feel like a victim. I feel like a woman who walked into a house she had paid for, found a sign with the wrong last name on the wall, and decided that day that her own name was going to mean something for the rest of her life. If you're still listening, thank you for staying with me through all of this. Stories like mine do not end with fireworks. They end with quiet rooms, clean floors, paid bills, kind cats, and walks along the water. They end with the way the morning light comes into a sunroom. They end with the sound of a mother apologizing slowly over years with small acts. They end with a check you put in an envelope marked roof fund. They end with a soft cream bedroom and a wooden plaque on the wall that says your name belongs to a place. They end with it. Intents you keep folded in your wallet that no one else has ever read but you. This is mine. I am keeping it. You are welcome here, but only on the truth. That is how my story ends. That is how every Ackles story ends if she is paying attention. Quietly, clearly, with both feet in her own life. If you have ever been the dependable one in your family, the one who lent the money, the one who was told to be the bigger person, the one who was loved the loudest only when you were lifting the heaviest, I want to hear from you in the comments. Tell me one moment when you finally understood what you had been carrying. Tell me what you set down. Tell me the sentence you wrote on the inside of your own life. Read each other's words, hold each other gently, and remember that you are not alone and that being kind has never required you to be quiet about your own worth. If this story moved you, stay with me on this channel because Ackles has many more rooms in her life still to walk into, and I would love for you to walk in with her.